Hello and welcome to the channel. My name is Peter. This will be the 6th article in the series about the swimming rules, and this one is going to be about starts and the touches that are done at the turns and the finishes. Before we launch into this week's topic, here's something I'd like you to think about. Why disqualify someone's swim? Now, I'll give my answer to that one next week, and if you like you can find some clues in the week 0 article, the one that's titled Foundation. So now back to our topic. Every technical official knows that most of the infractions of the rules occur between the flags and the wall. That is, at the starts, the turns and the finishes. It's only sometimes that you see some kind of infraction that has to do with a stroke for the full length, something like, for example, a scissor kick. But everything else occurs pretty much close to the wall. There's not much else to explain here, so I'm just going to be basically reading the text of the article. So we'll look at the starts first. Now, the starter actually has a very complicated job to do, and that happens in a very short time, just a couple of seconds. All the swimmer needs to know is, one thing, do as you were told when you were told. For example, when you hear the referee's whistle, you get straight up on the block. It doesn't mean put your goggles on, it means get straight up on the block. You've got to be ready to swim. When you're told take your marks, that means you promptly get into your starting position and keep still. The second thing to remember is when you hear the start signal, you go. You don't have to try to analyse anything else. Now, there can be a bit of confusion because starters and swimmers, and even some coaches, can fall into the habit of assuming that the start signal is sounded immediately after the starter finishes calling, take your marks. It says, take your marks, beep. Take your marks, beep. Actually, that's not so. The rule states that when all, and that is when every last one of the swimmers are steady, that is stopped moving, then the starter issues the start signal. So it's not a matter of time or anything else, it's that rule. When all the swimmers are steady, the starter issues the start signal. That's straight out of the rule book. So everyone just has to wait for as long as it takes, within reason. And remember that any forward movement prior to the start signal is being interpreted as starting before the start signal, which is a disqualifiable thing. Even be drifting forward, not even a little bit, that is disqualifiable. The one start rule and what happens when things go wrong will be mentioned in another article, and all this will be expanded on there. So much for the starts. Now, generally, the finish of the race and the touch done at the turn is the same as the swimming. If you do something different, then it could be wrong. Now, the alternate arm strokes, the backstroke and the freestyle, you just keep swimming until some part of your body touches the wall. I'll deal with backstroke shortly. Breaststroke and butterfly, you just keep doing the stroke until your hands hit the wall at the same time. So we'll look at backstroke first. Now, backstroke is swum on the back, obviously, plus or minus almost 90 degrees. So that's face up. You can go nearly 90 degrees that way, nearly 90 degrees that way. You're still doing backstroke, that's okay. You've only face down once you've gone further than that. So you may be nearly side on. Turning any further over to look for the wall or to touch is disqualifiable, and this is where a lot of novices get into trouble. They think they must be close to the finish, so they'll turn over to see where it is, and they'll touch face down while they've done 24 metres of backstroke and one of freestyle, or if it's a 50 metre race, you've done 49 metres of backstroke and one of freestyle. That last metre is not the stroke you're meant to be doing, so that's disqualifiable. So At the finish, just stay looking straight up, look skywards until you touch the wall. Until you touch the wall with your hand, shoulder or head, I think the rule reads. You can ram the wall with any of those. You won't want to, but it's allowed. Stay face up until you touch the wall. Now what you will learn to do is to count the number of strokes it takes you to swim from the backstroke flags so that you don't collide with the wall. It takes a lot of practice and a bit of adjusting, but you can get it right. So what you do is you do the number of strokes that you know that you do, and then you stop swimming, keep your arm out straight, keep kicking, and it'll only be about another half a metre until your hand hits the wall, and that way you won't hit the wall with your head. Now backstroke turns now allow for a forward tumble turn, touching with the feet. Now there are a lot of rules associated with this, and we'll deal with those in a later article. Now, breaststroke and butterfly, nearly everyone knows to remind the swimmers to touch the wall with both hands in breaststroke and butterfly. In fact, the rule goes straight on to say simultaneously, and now it continues on to say and separated. But we'll concentrate on the simultaneously bit. Simultaneously is just a big word that means at the same time. So one after the other is wrong. Now the things that can make that go wrong is if you're looking sideways. If you're looking sideways to see what the other swimmers are doing, that can make your arms uneven and you'll touch with one hand before the other. That'll be disqualifiable. Or if you're really in a hurry and think you've got to touch the end first before someone else, and you reach out with one hand, that's obviously disqualifiable too. So it's generally safe if you look straight ahead and continue to swim normally until you touch. Now remember that for breaststroke and butterfly, the touch done before the turn has the same rule as the one at the finish. Get both hands on the wall at the same time. There is something else I wanted to explain, and it nearly requires an article of its own, but I'm probably not going to get another opportunity, so I'll do that here. What has bewildered me as a technical official is the number of senior swimmers who still so often get disqualified for one-hand touches at the turns in breaststroke and butterfly, or non-simultaneous touches before the turns. And there can be numerous reasons for it. One is that most of them usually only get opportunities to swim short distance races. They don't do a lot of turns in competition. Another one is I doubt that they actually realise that is the rule when I explain to them that the rule for the touch before the turn is identical to that before the finish. Both hands on the wall at the same time, they just look at you blank. Even when they do know the rule, very often they just rush their turn and miss with the other hand. Many of them swerve into the turn and miss with the other hand, or touch with one hand after the other, which is outside the rules. There are all these things that they can get disqualified for, but one of the ones that mystified me recently was when I saw a swimmer come up and do a turn and split the hands up and down before the wall, reach up to the top of the wall with one hand and push down rapidly with the other. The second hand never touched the wall. I thought, why would an experienced swimmer do that? And then I saw it happen in training. A swimmer with 100 metres of breaststroke to do came lazily up to the wall, gets to here, one hand down, one hand up. I thought again, why would they do that? It took me another couple of weeks to realise that as young swimmers, when they get up to having to do a turn, and they'll probably do this in their freestyle races first, they'll want to reach for the top of the wall to help them to get around. But you know that if you reach for the top of the wall with both hands when you're only small and not very strong, you're going to sink. And so I imagine that that's where they learnt. The way to do that is to reach with the top of the wall with one hand and push rapidly down with the other one to hold yourself up. They probably learnt to do a touch turn in a freestyle race like that. And from there, they've just kept on practicing that. Even when they've had breaststroke turns to do and butterfly turns to do, that's what they've continued to do, particularly in training, particularly if no one else is watching. So I suggest if you're a coach, you know what it's like. You'll do a session of turns and finishes, and you'll get them all outside the backstroke flags and get them to swim in about 6 metres and do their turn or their finish against the wall, and nearly everyone does it properly. But what I suggest you do, if you don't do this very often, is give them 100 metres of breaststroke to do, and then you stroll up to the other end and watch what they do at their turn. You might be appalled. I've done that, and I've pointed out to them they should only ever practice proper technique. And I've been glared at, you know. We know, we won't do it, stop nagging us. Well, yes, they know, and yes, they will do it, because when you're in a race, you don't have time to think, and you will automatically tend to do whatever you've practiced the most. And it is a coach's job to be insistent. You end up sounding like a parrot. I don't know any other way to do it. So when you're teaching your swimmers to do turns, just watch what they do all the time. And if you see them doing this sort of thing, I suggest break them out of it as early as you can. Because if you keep letting them do it, the referee's going to be coming around the end of the pool and telling them that they're disqualified for their touch before the turn. There is one special rule for medley swimming, which says that the end of each stroke, that is the end of each section of the medley, must be concluded with the finish touch for that stroke. I'll expand on that another time. But basically, the end of the butterfly, you've got to touch the wall with both hands at the same time before going into the backstroke. End of the backstroke, think it's the end of a backstroke race. You have to touch the wall with your hand, head or shoulder while face up. You'll be unlikely to do a backstroke forward tumble turn after you've done all that. End of the breaststroke again, touch the wall with both hands at the same time before going and doing the freestyle leg. Now, don't think that because you only do 50-metre races that you don't have to bother yourself with this yet. The reason for this is that turns take a long time to learn to do well. I've seen swimmers who've tried to learn all about this Thursday afternoon and then try to use it in a race on Saturday, and they get disqualified simply because they don't get the touch right. And then because they haven't practiced it, they bungle their turn. And there's another reason. And there is another reason, and that is if you're used to swimming in a 50-metre pool and you go to a swim meet somewhere where there's a 25-metre pool, you are going to have to do a turn.